Hello and welcome to another episode of Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch, Ratcliffe, your host. And, we're here to talk today about climate change, and particularly as the world prepares for the United Nations COP26 Climate Change Conference, we wanted to catch up with the new CEO of the Foundation for Climate Restoration, Rick Wayman. The foundation is working to return atmospheric CO2 levels to pre-industrial levels by 2050, so back to what our ancestors knew before the industrial era. Members of the Foundation for Climate Restoration have been on the program many times to discuss carbon capture and sequestration, which is an approach to permanently removing excess atmospheric CO2. And you store it in the ground, you can store it in the sea. There's a variety of ways to do it once you've captured that CO2. It's developing fast, and a lot of discussion about the future of the sustainable environment revolves around how do we mix carbon capture, which contributes to restoring the environment, with our reductions. Do we offset, or do we, to get to what we describe as net zero, or do we actually get to zero carbon and then start to remove carbon using carbon sequestration? But first, we need to stop the rising emissions from rich and poor countries in an equitable way. And that's where COP26 comes into play. It's the world's last chance, many agree, to find a path to an equitable transition to renewable energy. So let's get into it. Welcome to the show. How are you today, Rick?
Very well, Mitch. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us. You're new to the organization, but I wanted to start with COP26 because it is coming up. This show will go live the day that the conference begins. How's the world doing? Are you seeing success in reducing emissions? And do you think that the goals coming out of Glasgow will be a step in the right direction?
Well, the first thing I'll say is the world at large is not doing enough. The title of your podcast, Earth911, this is absolutely an emergency, and we need to be doing absolutely everything we can to cut emissions and more. Unfortunately, we're not seeing that yet. I think that the recognition among governments, and especially among people around the world, is rising. We're seeing a clear consensus among scientists that temperatures must stay below 1.5 degrees Celsius. But based on where we are today with greenhouse gas emissions, it's not looking good to hit that goal. So what we're going to have to see at COP is increased commitments by government, but not only commitments, but action plans. The time for words has long passed, and we need to get into action right away.
So what goals does the foundation believe we need to see established to prevent that 1.5 degrees Celsius warming? And of course, we're already at 1.1 degrees higher than the beginning of the industrial era. So what proposals are most likely to be embraced at the meeting and make a difference?
Well, I'm not sure, unfortunately, what official agreements will come out of this meeting. It's very difficult to say right now. We're not even sure that some of the biggest polluters are going to show up. And if they do, if they're going to be taking it seriously, that doesn't mean that we can't make serious progress. I'm sure we'll get in a little bit later to the reason for my optimism around the previous work that I did prior to entering the climate movement. But I do have reason for hope. Part of that reason is, of course, there are governments in the world that are dedicated to this. In the UN system, theoretically, one country, one vote. So there is some power that small countries have here. But the other thing is, I mentioned public pressure, public activism, public awareness of this issue is rising every day. But also the private sector is really embracing this opportunity. First of all, for their own survival as companies, their own need to adapt and with the changing context. But also there's a great deal of money to be made in the new clean economy. And so companies that are looking after their bottom line, there's a reason to do good things for the environment because it's the right thing to do. But what we're seeing is there's also reasons to do good things for the environment because it's good for a company's bottom line. So ultimately, we're at a point with the climate where everyone needs to be on board, and different people are going to have different reasons for getting on board. But every single person, every single company, every single government needs to be on board ASAP.
Yeah, a lot of people characterize these investments in renewable energy transition as just a sort of a lost cause, just a vanity project with no returns. But of course, good investments produce substantial returns and create whole industries, as we've seen with the rise of computing and biotechnology and a variety of other things. One of the major issues in Glasgow will be the financing of emerging nations' transitions from carbon-intensive fossil fuels to renewables. And wealthy countries have committed to send $100 billion a year to help that transition, but have only come up with as much as about $78.9 billion in 2018, for instance. Do you think there's sufficient will going into Glasgow to deliver the roughly $1 trillion needed to accelerate that transition during the 2020s?
I do think that there's sufficient will. And, this is a huge question of equity, right? What countries have by and large caused the climate crisis, and what countries are in a financial position to do something about it immediately. Cost was once a central argument against transitioning to green energy from fossil fuels anywhere in the world.
Right.
But even now, already renewable energy is cheaper than alternatives, and this transition to renewable energy can create on the order of 25 million new energy jobs and roughly 500 million new jobs in other sectors. So there's a lot. This investment that wealthy countries have committed to making, there will be a return. There are intangible returns in terms of lessening the effects of climate change, hopefully. But there will also be very tangible returns, like I said, in terms of new jobs in the energy sector and as well as in other sectors.
Well, and savings, for instance, on healthcare related to fossil fuels pollution. So completely agree. Another major issue at COP is national commitments for reductions. Where do you think we're going to end up? Is there really a possibility that we're going to see an agreement to reduce global emissions by 50% by 2030?
Well, it's hard to predict what member states will agree upon. At F4CR, we believe that the global community should absolutely be striving for net zero emissions by 2030. So not cutting 30%, not cutting 50%, but actual net zero. We can do this, but this is a waypoint on the path to restoring pre-industrial CO2 levels. So by 2050. In terms of COP26, I doubt it's unlikely that the governments will come anywhere near these ambitious targets that F4CR has. But again, as I said before, the success of climate restoration is not dependent solely on governments. They can absolutely contribute greatly to putting the world on a good path. But there are also other ways that we as a world can arrive there. So we'll be pushing for this, absolutely. We do have some supportive governments who are well on board with being ambitious, with being very ambitious. But in terms of the final agreement, it's very difficult to say at this point.
Well, now, the private opportunity also requires that we see the establishment of an international carbon market so that we can initially trade carbon credits and then prevent them from being double counted as well. Would that accelerate the development of the carbon capture and sequestration projects that would contribute to that net zero by 2030 that you're describing? Because obviously, net zero by 2030 means a lot of carbon offsets are used to get us to the zero number. How do we get there without a market?
Well, I think that there is a way for a global carbon credit market to be developed. It absolutely has to be transparent, verifiable, robust, environmentally robust.
Mhm.
Um, but yes, we definitely can get there. It has proven thus far to be an enormous challenge. For almost 30 years, countries have tried and largely failed to draw up robust rules. So this is, and your listeners may hear this term thrown around in the media here coming up during COP, Article 6. So under the Paris Agreement of 2015, 190 countries set emissions reduction targets under Article 6. So part of that is establishing a voluntary global carbon market. Deep divisions still remain on the design of that carbon market. If it's done right, this mechanism could double the reduction in global emissions and make it cheaper for countries to meet their Paris Agreement climate goals. But this is very important, Mitch. If countries are unable to close loopholes or guarantee that the carbon market will lead to real emissions reductions, it could do more harm than good. And the quick way to explain that is, if they're if it looks like on paper they're reducing emissions because of this carbon market, but their industries and the country as a whole is still cranking out tons of emissions.
Right.
In reality, that's where it does more harm than good. It's insufficient to rely on a carbon market to make up for bad polluting behavior. It's got to happen in conjunction with real investment and real effort to cut emissions to their absolute lowest possible level.
Yeah, and a lot of people see the trade-off as sort of one for one. You cut emissions and then you do offsets, but if it needs to be cut emissions by 2 or 3, do one offset in order for this to represent real progress. What would you be looking for next week in terms of key agreed upon goals or progress towards a transparent carbon marketplace? Are there signals that you're going to be watching for as you follow COP?
Well, I think that the carbon market in general is really going to be not just governments. Again, I think the private sector has a large role to play. We're already seeing the emergence of private sector voluntary carbon markets.
Right.
These definitely have similar pitfalls to a public sector carbon market. But I think that honestly, governments have a lot to learn from the private sector and what has been done so far, and the efforts to make that voluntary private sector market again verifiable, measurable, and indicative of real efforts to get to net zero and ultimately beyond. So I think that the conversations that are going to happen in COP between the private sector and the public sector are going to be really valuable and will hopefully allow governments to learn from what's been done already and build something better, more robust, and very legitimate, not a fig leaf for ongoing pollution by fossil fuel companies and others.
So do you expect those conversations to take place in public where we'll see them, or will that be happening in the background and we're going to have to be looking for signals about what privately was discussed?
There's sort of an endless number of panels happening at COP. Yeah. And some of them are public-private combinations. Mm-hmm. So I would hope that some of this conversation will be public. It deserves to be public, absolutely. We as the public are the ones who deserve to know. So I hope so. But as with any international diplomacy, there is a certain amount that goes on behind closed doors during the day, and also behind different closed doors in the evenings over dinner, et cetera. So I think it'll be a combination. I think we will see some of it, and we'll hopefully see some results of that in terms of announcements nearing the end of the 2-week COP session.
So just before we started this recording, we got the additional details from President Biden's Build Back Better plan the $1.75 trillion plan now used to be 3.5. And I wanted to ask whether or not these really represent substantial improvements. So the bill that looks like it will pass Congress will have $320 billion in energy tax credits, $105 billion for developing resilience against extreme weather, floods, and so forth, $110 billion for investment and incentives to drive the acceleration of clean energy transitions. And the government is going to buy $20 billion worth of clean energy in order to help drive that transition as well. I don't see any carbon capture funding here, but is that progress?
Well, Mitch, as we were discussing this prior to recording, what I said is the fact that there's greater than zero in there is a big step forward. Unfortunately,
a little movement is a lot of movement in this case.
In terms of the U.S. government in today's context, it is. And, that's a really unfortunate position to be in as a nation. And we absolutely can do better. But it's a starting point. And it's important to recognize and celebrate when good things happen, even if it's not good enough, even if much more needs to happen. Something is happening, and out of these investments, you never know what is going to come. Sometimes there are startup companies that need $1 million in seed funding to create a process that will absolutely revolutionize the energy industry. Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about billions and billions of dollars in investment, something could work here. We don't know. It remains to be seen. But I'm pleased that at least there is a little something happening there. I would of course love to see carbon removal having much more of a dedicated line item here. Right. But we're taking small steps in the U.S. But honestly, it's a positive thing that they are recognizing that climate change is real. So
it's such a commentary on the state of the country that a little bit of any movement at all is progress rather than real direction.
Sure. But we definitely can't rest on this, right? I mean, there's some investment happening. If this ends up getting approved, that's great. But we absolutely cannot relax, cannot let up the pressure. Much more needs to be done on the governmental level. But like I've been saying all along, there's a lot of movement that is happening in the private sector, regardless of what the U.S. government is doing.
So let me change the topic just a little bit here and ask about your recent joining the Foundation for Climate Restoration. You came from the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation, which was part of a network of organizations that won the 2017 Nobel Peace Prize. What attracted you to climate restoration, and what lessons are you bringing from the peace movement that you think are going to translate effectively into fighting the climate crisis?
Well, so before I took this job with the Foundation for Climate Restoration, I talked extensively with my 12-year-old daughter, Lulu, about the organization and what it stands for. She's really my measurement of whether the work I do in the world is the right thing or not. Mm-hmm. And she didn't think twice about endorsing climate restoration. To her, it obviously needs to be done, and with great urgency. This is her future. This is her friend's future. So the thing that motivates me personally about F4CR's mission, again, which is to restore the climate to pre-industrial levels of CO2 by 2050. So what motivates me about that mission is that when we're successful, we will have restored the climate to those pre-industrial levels of CO2 before the time that Lulu is the age I am today. So we're talking less than 30 years from now. She'll be younger than I am right now. And the fact that we have the potential to restore the climate by that time is just unspeakably motivating. So that is why I joined this organization and why I'm so excited to do this work every day. In terms of what I've learned from my work around nuclear weapons, around banning nuclear weapons in 2017 at the UN, changing the norms and laws that are deeply entrenched in a system. It's hard work, and it can be very daunting. It can feel like we're never going to succeed. But what I learned from the nuclear weapons work is meaningful results are absolutely achievable. Success cannot and will not happen without innovation, leadership, and a people-centered approach. But again, this is why I'm so inspired by the Foundation for Climate Restoration's thought leadership on climate restoration, on climate issues more broadly, as well as our partnerships with some of the best thinkers and doers who are actively making change.
One of the big challenges, and we mentioned it earlier in the conversation, is the discussion about human rights and equity as we try to really move quickly into the renewables era. What did you learn from working out all of the conflicts, even within the anti-nuclear movement, that you can apply to the climate crisis?
Well, the biggest thing I would say is a significant reason for our success in banning nuclear weapons and achieving the treaty at the UN is that we consciously kept people first in our approach. Countries still like to make their arguments about abstract notions of national defense or military strategy, but ultimately that issue comes down to the catastrophic effect that nuclear weapons have on people. Mm-hmm. Similarly, when we're talking about taking aggressive climate action, many nations have hesitation around their old-fashioned notions of the economy and economic growth. But we know that climate change is currently disproportionately affecting low-income and indigenous people. My friends in the Marshall Islands, which is a small island nation in the middle of the Pacific, may literally no longer have land to live on if sea level rise continues. So, it's essential to keep people and, of course, other living things at the forefront of our work for climate action and not get lost down that rabbit hole of the economy or fossil fuel jobs that may be lost. As it happens, we have strong evidence that a healthy green economy will actually create more jobs for people. Right. But again, just keeping people first, not letting the discourse kind of go down these sort of abstract directions that are not connected to the reality that people live every day. That's really key. And that's something that I'm paying a lot of attention to.
Well, let me ask about some of the job creation opportunities. I recently hosted a panel for the Foundation's second carbon capture forum. And we talked about how you can extract CO2 from the sky and make a variety of materials and products from the carbon that you take out of the atmosphere. Do you see investors and companies turning to the sky as a source of raw materials in growing numbers? And what projects do you consider bellwethers of adoption of carbon capture technology that our listeners should be watching and really being attentive to the evolution of this new industry?
Carbon sequestration technologies are gaining credibility. We're seeing them as viable solutions to climate change. And it's catching the attention of some of the world's biggest investors. We've seen Elon Musk and the Musk Foundation sponsoring a $100 million innovation competition with X Prize, focusing on developing innovative carbon dioxide removal solutions. We work closely with Dean Sanjeev Kagaram from the Thunderbird School of Global Management at Arizona State. He's identified a $1 to $3 trillion market opportunity in climate restoration solutions. So that makes it a no-brainer for investors.
Sure.
One particular project right now that I'm really interested in and really inspired by is a company called Blue Planet. So they have developed a commercially viable way to capture and permanently sequester CO2 within limestone aggregate products sold for use in concrete. So producing that limestone, producing the limestone aggregates provides a scalable solution in the carbon removal space because there's a well-established immediate commercial market for construction aggregates. Concrete is, I think, after water, the most widely used or widely in demand commodity in the world.
In the world. And the Blue Planet concrete is being used to build the new runway at San Francisco's International Airport and one of the terminals. And it's incredible to walk through that and know that the cement around you was literally in the sky a year or two ago.
It is incredible. And it's just indicative of the level of innovation that can happen in our world. I mean, it's quite remarkable. To give a sense of the potential scale of this kind of technology, if we were to replace all of the quarried rock that we use globally for construction materials with synthetic limestone, the limestone aggregate made from sequestered carbon from the atmosphere, the market could be large enough to remove and sell all the world's excess CO2 by 2050. That's 1 trillion tons of excess carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It could all, I mean, theoretically, if all concrete throughout the world were this type, we could take care of the whole thing. Obviously, that's not quite going to happen, but there's so much potential here, and we're only talking about one potential climate restoration solution, of which there are many.
And we just have a couple of minutes left, but let me ask, what is your strategy for the foundation as you take on leadership there?
Well, our I guess you would call it a medium-term goal by 2030. What we want to see is carbon dioxide removal having reached what we call restoration scale. That means that the carbon dioxide removal processes collectively are removing 50 gigatons per year of CO2. That's a lot of carbon dioxide. That's 50 billion tons per year. But it absolutely can be done through a combination of technological and natural processes. As I mentioned before, it requires public pressure, it requires private sector ingenuity and investment, and it requires government support, particularly in the form of policies. So it's important to remember, even if we get to net zero emissions by 2030, we would continue to suffer terrible and increasing effects of climate change unless we simultaneously remove the 1 trillion tons of excess CO2. Sometimes people call it legacy carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So starting in 2030, if we remove 50 gigatons per year for 20 years, we will have restored our climate to a level of approximately 300 parts per million of CO2, down from the current approximately 415 ppm. So humans flourished historically in a world in which the levels were 300 ppm or less, and that's what we want to see. So in the next 8+ years, we are working to encourage and foster policies, culture shift, behavior shift, and innovation and ingenuity to make this happen. We absolutely believe that it will happen, and it's not going to be easy, like I said before, but we know that it can be done.
Well, that's an inspiring goal, and that's one of the reasons that we have you all back on the show frequently to talk about, because this is, again, the path out of the climate crisis, not simply to halting the worsening of the climate crisis. Rick, I want to thank you for taking time to talk with us today.
Thank you very much, Mitch. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
We've been talking with Rick Wayman. He's the new CEO of the Foundation for Climate Restoration, and you can find out more about F4CR, as they like to be called, at Foundation for Climate Restoration, all one word, foundationforclimaterestoration.org. I'll also include a link to the interview or the session that I hosted at the second annual Climate Restoration Forum about mining the sky in the article that accompanies this podcast. Folks, take a few minutes to share this podcast and any others that have good ideas that you want to get in front of your family, friends, complete strangers on the street. Let's spread these ideas. More ideas means less waste, and less waste means that we are making progress towards a sustainable economy. This is Earth 911, Sustainability in Your Ear. We're going to be back with another interview soon. In the meantime, folks, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.